Okay, good morning. So we started last week, letter number 13, Iggeres 13 Yud Gimel, and it's a fascinating insight from the Alter Rebbe about neshamas. That every single Jew, every single neshama comes from a different source, and therefore its nature, its character, its style, its natural behavior is different. So I wanted to just take a few minutes to go back and explain two things that we touched upon, but I want to take it to a little more understanding. That is, we spoke about that some neshamas come from Yamin, come from their right, which is Chesed, and some come from the left, which is Gevurah. What does it mean, Gevurah? It means, and what is Chesed? Chesed's nature is that I just do, I give. It's more of a, I'm not so calculated, I'm not so exact, I'm not so perfect in my measurements. I just do things in a way that I just give. And in the process, we gave the metaphor last week of different ways of people who cook or make recipes. Some people follow exact recipe. Some follow a general, casual measurements. It's not that one's right or one's wrong. It's different styles. So what we're talking about here really are not worked on behaviors, but natural default behaviors. That there's some people are naturally in the line of chesed, and some people are naturally in gevurah. Gevurah means everything I do is with a cheshbon. Everything I do is calculated. The result is that chesed people are much more bubbly and outgoing and public, and gevurah people are much more inside, much more reserved. And the reason is there's no need for bubbly. I only do what's needed. I do exactly the square. I do what's needed. I follow the recipe. I give it tzedakah. I do everything in my life within the normal, expected measurements. There's no need to be bubbly about something I do. The way we translate it, the nature of gevurah and din, of being from the side of left, also comes into the world of humility. In other words, someone who is chesed does things publicly. Someone who is gevurah does things privately, which means if I'm a gevurah person, I'm very private about the Rebbe, we could say, was more on the side of gevurah, this sense. What does it mean? The Rebbe was an extremely hatzna very private. The Rebbe conducted himself in a way, and conducts himself in a way that's extremely not sharing any of himself. A person could live within 2 feet of the Rebbe and not experience and see the Rebbe's greatness, his brilliance, his emotion, his dedication, his love, because it's so inside. It's not expressed on the outside. There are some people that you're with them and you feel their energy. They're just bubbling over with their ideas, their thoughts, their feelings, and it's outside. It's not that one's better or one's worse. One is naturally like this, and one is naturally like that. So I'll give an example of the quality and the nature of chesed and gevurah. So gevurah falls in the category of humility. Now, humility is always used, or usually used, as a checklist item. A person should study Torah. A person should give tzedakah. A person should love their fellow Jew. A person should daven. A person should be humble. Humble means don't have an ego. And there are some people that work tremendously on being humble. That means they made an effort that no one should know and no one should be aware of their greatness. And there are many stories. I just heard a new story about the Rebbe Maharash, an amazing story of the Rebbe Maharash. There was a discussion after the Tzemach Tzedek passed away that they wanted to, there was one of the great mashpiyim on Lubavitch, actually the original Tanya shiur giver. All Tanya shiurim today that we give is based on shiurim that started officially from Rabbi Shmuel Greinim Esterman. He was a mashpiyah on Lubavitch. He was a very well-known holy chassid. When the Tzemach Tzedek passed away, he wanted to know, who should I take? He left behind one of his sons that passed away. He had 6 sons that were still living, and they wanted to know which one should I choose to be my Rebbe. There was many great sons. So his mashpiyah, I think his name was Shmuel Ber, he said, I can't tell you which one you should choose because they're all great holy people. He said, but I could tell you who I'm choosing. I'll tell you why I'm choosing him. I'm choosing the Rebbe Maharash, or the Maharash as it was called, the youngest son. At that time, the youngest son, very similar to the Rebbe, did not express any greatness. The other ones all were known to be brilliant scholars, deep people, and the other sons were like tremendously holy people. The Rebbe Maharash conducted himself, they would say, like if one guy would be the businessman, it would be him. He didn't seem to be so dedicated to learning. The Rebbe, when he was, before he became a Rebbe, he was known to walk with a newspaper. He dressed very classy. The Rebbe gave an air of being, culture versus the holy, deep, profound tzaddik that he was. So he says that once the Tzemach Tzedek said a mimer on something of the Arizal from the Pri Etz Chaim, and I couldn't understand it. So I went to the sons of the Tzemach Tzedek and asked them to please explain to me this concept, and none of them could understand it. So I figured I'm not going to bother going to Maharash, because if they don't know it, sure he won't know it. He's the youngest, he's the least involved with learning. But as I was walking back home, the Rebbe Maharash at that time lived. He's only one of the sons who lived in the same compound, the chutzner, the courtyard of the Tzemach Tzedek. As he walked by the Rebbe's house, he sort of saw the light was on in the Rebbe Maharash's room, and he looks into the window. He peeks in, and he sees the Rebbe Maharash is sitting there, deeply involved in a sefer. Which sefer? The Pri Etz Chaim that was discussed. What page is he on? The exact page of the mimer that was the discussion that he couldn't understand. He said, maybe he does understand it. He goes, knocks on the doors. And the Maharash says, who's there? He said, I think his name's Shmuel Ber. He said, 1 second. A moment too late, opens the door. And he comes inside. The sefer's gone. On the table, some newspapers and some other stuff. And he says, yes, can I help you? He says, I came to ask you a question about the mimer. He says, coming to me? He said, my brothers are the big scholars. Why are you coming to me? He says, Rabbi Shmuel, whatever he called him, he said, I passed by your window a few minutes ago. I saw what goes on here. If you don't help me with this, I'm going to tell everybody what I saw. He says, okay, but you can't tell anybody. And he explained him exactly the depth. So he told Shmuel Gainim, I'm taking him as my Rebbe, because he's Hatzalech. He's a guy, there's much more depth than we know. So this idea of this behavior. So before Chassidim, before Chabad, the nature was that I am somebody who's humble. I am very humble, I'm very private. But the truth is, the definition of humility is missing the beauty of humility. What's the beauty of humility? The beauty of humility is not that I don't show off. It's that my relationship with God is private. To appreciate that, we find something very strange, and you get asked this question every now and then, and I'm sure it's come across questions here. We find by Chabad Chassidim, and many Chassidim Mechlal, in general, we don't find intimacy or love shared by the husband and wife in public. You don't find the hugging or the touching or the emotional embraces. And again, also in general by a lot of religious couples. Why not? Is it a secret that you love each other? It's something very special that is private. It's not because it's a secret. It's not because I'm humble. It's because my relationship with my spouse is private. And therefore, I don't share it. You have some people, especially on social media, they're upset at their spouses. Everyone knows about it. They're the best husband, the best wife. Okay, that's a very happy relationship. When your relationship is shouted on social media, a healthy relationship is kept private, very personal. It's like imagine a personal letter of love that a spouse writes to a spouse, and if it became public, I'd be very ashamed. Why are you ashamed? Everyone knows you love your wife. You married her. You live with her. I mean, this is why are you ashamed? Not ashamed. It's personal. So the definition we were talking about here of humility is not one of the opposite of ego. That's of course that doesn't require Hasidus. The Alter Rebbe is honing in on something which is much deeper. The humility that comes from the private space relationship with us and God. It's my space. It's me. And if you go back to the 3 verses we spoke about, Hatzna Leches, to walk privately with God, the idea of that we cry in private, the idea that our Torah studies in private, it's not that it's a secret. This is I conduct myself in my love relationship with God in my own space. And that is a natural behavior of Chesed. This is not a worked-on behavior. On the other side, you have Gvura. That's not the way of Gvura. That's din, very private, very measured. It's private. The other side is a person, for an example, is marrying off a child. A person that has a tremendous joy. He doesn't make a calculation and say, you know what? I think because it's a day of my son's wedding, day of my brother, day of my wedding, I'm going to make sure people see that I'm joyous. It's just bubbling over. You became whatever the case is. You finally moving to Eretz Yisrael. You finally have whatever your hope was. You finally have it. It's not an effort required that I'm going to try now and share. People should know and experience and feel my experience. I am so living with it. I am so taken through with it. It's like they say, something very interesting difference between fear and joy. When a person is truly, truly afraid and terrified, it is possible to hide it. I mean, a friend will know, but a person that's terrified, it's possible to hide it because I could sit here. How are you doing? I mean, I'm having a surgery tomorrow. I'm terrified that I'm this, that. But I don't hide it. A person that's full of joy, it's impossible to hide it. I'm like this. I'm really so happy now. No, you're not. If you were happy, you'd be tapping your feet. You're jumping. Super happy people. Why? Because the nature of happiness and joy and behavior is that it spills over. So the person who's chesed, it's not that he stands there and says, okay, everyone should know I love my wife. that person's living in the zone where you see him, this guy's in love, this lady's in love. How can you know? It's in your face, it's in your eyes, I see it, it's all over you, bubbling over you, you're in a joyful mood. So these behaviors are called the natural behaviors. That's what we're talking about until here in Tanya. Until here in this letter, the author is talking about two natural behaviors that are found by people that are naturally very closed and closure, which comes from din or gevura. People are naturally very expressive, and that one's better or worse. It's two different focuses on the way I live. Do I live in a very personal and private way, or do I live in a very overflowing way? That's what we're up to here. I just wanted to go back and explain those two ideas because now we're going to go into the next stage. So again, the key element here is that until this point in the letter, the author is talking about default, natural, without effort. It takes no effort for me to keep my relationship private. It would take effort for me to share with somebody because my natural thing is, if that's my nature, there are some people that naturally have to just bubble over. That's natural. That takes effort to contain it and conceal it. And by the way, those people should. What we're going to say now is that both of these behaviors really are your natural default, but you have to have the other side too, which means you can't just serve Hashem with your nature or your natural. Or we're going to take it one step further. That truth to be told, in your natural, you really have hidden inside the other one too. But what we're going to say now is that basically, while your nature is to serve Hashem with concealment, not necessarily is that the right thing all the time, a lot of the time. And to explain how something can be right, for depending on the time, I'll just give two examples that I saw. One example is how two different behaviors can be right. Some people like to talk at length, and they are very articulate and they explain at length, but when they write, they might write in short. So which one are you, a lengthy person or you're a short? When I speak, I articulate and I explain in detail. Now the Rebbe says, like we had on Tanya 2-3 days ago, he's talking about a very complex idea in the relationship with Hashem. He says, I can't put over in writing. Send one member of your community to me, says the Alter Rebbe. We just had it this past Shabbat, I think. And I will explain to them in detail this mistake that was made in interpreting the writing of the Baal Shem Tov, why they burnt the Baal Shem Tov's Sefer. That was the Tanya of Shabbos morning. Yeah, so I was home, so I remember that. Okay, so he says I could only explain it in verbal. So certain things I could verbally explain at length and in writing only in short. Also, some people, it depends who you're talking to. If I'm talking here in this class and I want to explain a general concept in Chassidus and Tanya, the more I talk about it, the more I'm messing things up. Why? You know the subject. You're familiar with it. If I'm talking to someone who's never learned Tanya before, I need to talk much, much more. In other words, depending who the receiver is, how much I should share. So the recipient or the situation demands different behavior. I once heard Rabbi Moshe Rapoport bring when I was in California. He said, there are three things you have to know in life: what to say, to who to say it, and when to say it. And when. And he gave all different examples. Like you meet, what to say, when to say it, and where to say it. That's what he told me. What to say, when, where. For example, he said, if you say good morning to your friend in the evening, that doesn't make sense. If you say good morning to your friend, but he's sitting in a private in the bathroom, you open the door and say good morning. It's the right thing, right time, wrong place. And he explains that everything, and his whole point was, or his bringing was, it's not so much what we're doing, it is a place for everything. There's a place to be silly, a place to be serious, a place to be, there's a place for everything. And we went through this just now with the hostages. There's a place to celebrate the coming back, and a place to cry for the tremendous tragedy that's going on. So this is what we're saying here. There's really a desire or a need for emotion guided by effort and work, not just our default soul. My soul is defaulted. I'm going to bring an example from this week's parsha in just a moment. Here it is. Hine, Paul Ish Yisrael, page Kufyotes. We're 2/3 of the way down, the new paragraph. Kol Ish Yisrael, every single Jew, every single member of the Jewish community, Tzarech Liyos, needs to be Kol Mebeis Bechines Elu. He has to be a composite of both of these. You can't just say, listen, this is my nature, this is who I am, deal with it. No, this is your nature, you deal with it, you work on it. Try and be in the right moment. You can't just come in, you're a giggly, jokey person. That's someone you come into a shiva house. Listen, this is me. No, right now you're meant to be serious. But that's not my style. It doesn't matter. The place demands a certain behavior. So you have to have each behavior. There's no such a thing that doesn't have a place. There's a place for every behavior. I remember, I think we spoke about this last week. I don't know if I mentioned it, that the Rebbe says a place to be an atheist. And when someone comes to you and says, I need help, I have no money, I can't pay my mortgage, don't say pray to God. There's no God today. Just you. You help the person. Meaning there's a time for every single behavior. There's a time to be happy, a time to be serious. We find something fascinating. He's going to go now into and examine two different historical figures. One is Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel are very famous. There was a Shammai and Hillel, two people who were holy rabbis, lived in the end of the second Beis Hamikdash, lived in times of Herod, times of all the famous difficulties of that time. They were extreme polar opposites of behavior. Shammai was exact, measured, perfect, everything right, and everything was strict. He was Gevurah all the way. Hillel was absolute chesed, kindness, compassion, patience, waiting, giving. And the next one we'll do is Avram and Yitzchak. Avram is chesed, 100% chesed. Yitzchak is 100% Gevurah. I'm going to say how each of those really, not always, most of the time. My primary behavior is one, and sometimes the other way around. And we see this here. Thank you, Omer, for your room. And therefore you find certain things based Shammai, who was usually Mr. Strict, Mr. Strong. Sometimes he'll say, in this case, he'll be more lenient. What happened? You're supposed to be the strict guy. I know, but in this case, I'm lenient. Why? Because there's behaviors that sometimes demand, the situation demands me to be lenient. I know usually I'm strict, but sometimes I'm lenient. And sometimes you'll find where Hillel is stricter than Beis Shammai. Not just as strict as Beis Shammai, he's stricter than Beis Shammai. And say, hey, that's unbecoming you. It's unbecoming the Hillel family. You are the nice people. You are the kind people. We know all the stories of Hillel, his patience. One of the fascinating stories are, not talking about as often as other stories, is we all know the famous story of the convert. But there's another convert that came to Shammai. He says, I want to convert on the condition that I become a Kohen Gadol. I want to be the high priest. Shammai says, get out of here. We don't do that here. Hillel says, sure, come. Let's start learning together. And after the guy was learning for a while, he starts realizing it doesn't make sense. Okay, so I'll do. Meaning he showed him in a different way. So 1 second, who was right and who was wrong? It depends. You see, one time you can argue on what a color is. We're not doing that here. We're not arguing if blue is blue or black is black. We're arguing what's prettier, blue or black. What's more needed in this room right now, white or yellow. So we're not arguing about colors. If what color are we arguing which is needed here? And that's not the Beis Shammai always leans this way. And we'll find, by the way, you're in yeshiva, this is something which you study Talmud or something, you find very often you're learning the Talmud, and you have two guys learning or two women learning, and one says to the other, you're learning, Rashi says this, and Rashi's grandchildren were the opponents of him in study, not in life, but in study, and Tosfos, the authors of Tosfos, they say the opposite, and one of the partners say, you know what? I agree with Rashi. I agree with Tosfos. Does that mean one of them is right and one of them is wrong? It means one person's wavelength understands that perspective. One understands that perspective, which means nowadays we're so used to in the world that everything is either right or wrong, like with politics or with things, because it becomes such a polar extreme. And we'll get to that in a minute in Yiddishkeit. But the truth is, when it comes to matters of seichel, not matters of extremism or hate, but matters of seichel, the ability to see someone else's approach means you have a broad mind. Doesn't mean I agree with you, but I see where you're coming from. You know what? Wow, that's such a fascinating approach. I see why you say that, but I still think my theory is right. In other words, I'm wise enough and big enough to see both perspectives. Nevertheless, I'm choosing this one because it fits into either my character, my personality, my upbringing, my nature, my nurture. There's something about me that leans this way, which means they're both good ideas. It's not just the one rabbi said, I say it's forbidden, I say it's forbidden. But there's really something much deeper going on here. And this is the beauty of what we're going to talk about. You see, both rabbis are not just focused on self. They're focused on the experience. What does that mean? When something is permitted or forbidden in the world, what does that mean? If it's permitted, it means I can take that and elevate it. If it's forbidden, it means I can't elevate it. So for an example, a piece of pork, no matter how important your guests are, you say, I'm doing the big mitzvah of Hachnasas Archim, there's no kosher meat available, but not kosher meat. You cannot serve non-kosher meat. What do you mean? Why not? Because non-kosher meat is usher. Usher means it's tied down. It can't be elevated. It's not you could if you're strong enough. It can't be elevated. Now, there's a story which I think we mentioned in the past, which is a powerful story, which is the exception understanding, which actually fits into this as well, of the Tzemach Tzedek was once traveling, and he came to a certain town, and the people asked him in the town, he asked someone in the town, could the shech meat for him? He needed chicken for Shabbos, the shech the chicken. So the Tzemach Tzedek was going to pay the person with money. And the person says, I don't want money, I want to have a person to ask a question. I have a question that bothers me, can I ask a question instead of taking money? And the Tzemach Tzedek said, yes. And my question is, he says, today we're very strict about Chalav Yisrael. Chalav Yisrael means that milk that was not watched by a Jew in the milking is forbidden and it's a very serious status and it's a causes impurity. The mind, all the things that it says about Chalav Yisrael and Chalav Akum. He says this rule is only about maybe 1,500 years old. Before that, the rabbis of the Mishnah, David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, they drank Chalav Akum. How could that be? If it's something today we say is so bad, how could it be they drank that stuff? Meaning before the decree was enacted that you can't have a non-Chalav Yisrael milk, how did the great rabbis and the Nevi'im and the prophets, obviously it was allowed, it wasn't an issue. The Tzemach Tzedek answered something very fascinating. And I saw a Sikh of the Rebbe on the same subject regarding establishing holidays. He says, the whole idea of something which is permitted or forbidden is if you can elevate it or not. He says the early generations, those tzaddikim, their souls are so great, they can elevate even milk that was milked by a Gentile. And therefore, they can elevate it. There's no problem for them. Our souls don't have that quality. We can't elevate it. And if we can't elevate it, it's forbidden to us. Meaning it's not that the milk changed. We don't have that ability to lift it up anymore. That's a very exception of the things on us. Usually it's about the food itself. Just to understand, there's a story about a duck. I don't know which one of the Rebbes it was, but there was a Rebbe that came before him with a duck. And the shaila was if it's kosher or treif for duck. And the people were saying it's treif. The Rebbe came around, don't say it's treif. He says, this duck has a piece of an neshama that did sins in the previous generation. And he came down here and was punished to come back inside of a duck. And when you're going to take this duck and make a brach on it, once and for all, you're going to elevate that soul and finally bring this soul to its landing place, meaning to closure with its sins. If you're going to declare it unfit to eat, the soul's got to come down again in this torturous way, either in a duck again or worse, in another different creature. And he says, how could you be so insensitive? It's kosher. Now, 1 second, was it kosher or not? So the question is, a lot of times you have ways you could lean and find a way something's kosher or forbidden. And that's what their arguments are in halacha. Should I lean and push to find it's permitted, and therefore we get elevated? Or should I lean and find that it's forbidden? Some people, you have in every case, will say, I'm not taking this flight because the land's too late. I'm not taking this flight because it has a stopover. This one's too expensive. What is your primary concern? Is it the cost? Is it the time? Is it the length of the trip? Is it a stopover? Is it the airline? Everyone has different preferences. Same thing in halacha. We say, what is the most overriding factor here? So when you have a machlekes b'shamai b'shillel, they're not discussing really. There really is 5 or 6 options how to determine the answer here. Beis Shammai, who leans always to the strictness, is usually lean that it's forbidden. Beis Hill, who usually leans to the leniency, is lean that it's permitted. Not because one's right or one's wrong. How are they going to see this case? Is it elevatable or not? And that's really machlekes that's really the machlekes of Shammai Hillel, and that translates into their students. They said huge yeshivas. Of course, the Shammai Hillel was smaller because Herod killed many of them because they were tough and they went against Herod. But the 2 yeshivas, the 2 big schools, major position to each other. But I don't know if it's the Gemara tells us or the commentaries tell us that they married into each other. The children of Beis Shammai married the children of Beis Hillel. What does it mean? It wasn't personal. While they had differences and they understood my path and my perspective is different, I grew up this way. I'm Sephardi, Ashkenazi. Well, that's more serious. But I'm not going there. But the reality is the differences were more in how to perceive the correct path in serving Hashem. Not are you a good or bad decision maker. And therefore, we find that Beis Shammai's children married Beis Hillel's children very often because they were all dedicated people. The question was, how far do you lean to find the loophole to make it kosher and elevate the spark, or you say you can't elevate the spark at all? That's what this argument's get about. It was not about self. It wasn't about me, I want to eat the food. It was what is the best scenario here? And Beis Shammai leaned usually to being stricter and more critical, and Beis Hillel used to be more soft and more open-minded to solutions. Let's go back in here. Sha'af Beis Shammai, sheshorish nishmasim b'chinas smoil. So why does sometimes Beis Shammai cross over the aisle and vote with the other side? Because Beis Shammai, even though his neshama is primary from left, which means strictness, because even Beis Shammai, who usually lean towards the left to be strict, also occasionally went and became more lenient. And Saint Beis Hillel, that was usually, we'll see in a second, lenient, voted oftentimes to be more strict. So we see here that there's an ability within a person to go and vote for the other aisle, across the aisle. This ability, the Alter Rebbe says, is a sign of holiness. Why? The difference between holiness and and Tumma or Klippa is unity. What does unity mean? Unity means that we're all here one. Well, we're different, I know, but we're connected. The fact that I'm connected to those that are different than me is the ultimate sign of unity. The fact that we take the lulav on the esrog and the dasa and the rose and bring it together, that's unity. That's holiness. If it's not holy, it's separate and disconnected. It can't be together. Unity represents togetherness. In other words, somebody that's an extremist or can't get along with others, I don't care how righteous you think you are, you're not holy. It's not coming from a holy place. Because holiness will always, and we find this a fascinating thing with the Rebbe and the Rebbes in general, they always found commonality and unity and connection with other Jews, no matter if the guy was a sinner or anti this or anti that, because our holiness brings things together. It's division of klippa that separates things, as we'll see in a moment. He says, and therefore, Beis Hillel, who came from Yemina Elyon, the right, which is chesed, they went and found ways, things that Beis Shammai said were forbidden to be elevated. They said we could do it. It should be permitted from its being tied down. And here's the key words: you could elevate it above, which means they said, I know Beis Shammai says you can't elevate this duck. There's a story with, I think, of a Hillel Paracher. I don't remember which, I think of Hillel Paracher, that they once had a cow that was shechted, and they came to him with a shaila if it's kosher, and he said, it's kosher. So somebody said to him, 1 second, but the Bach and the Shach and the Taz and the Ramah, all of them say it's not kosher. How can you say it's kosher? He says, when I get up to heaven, he says, I could sit down and explain to the Ramah and to the Shach and the Taz and the Bach, I can explain to them all my theory why it's kosher. Well, if the cow's going to come argue with me why I made him treif, I'm not going to sit and argue with the cow. I don't want to get a discussion with the cow. But the truth is, there is more than one face to Torah. The question is how you lean. And that's why, by this way, they say that real Rav understands the situation, not just by the question, but who's asking the question. It doesn't mean you, God forbid, distort the law. It means there are times you can be more lenient and times you can be more strict. Someone's becoming kosher for the first time. They have a question on a dish that something happened, or a question of, you could be more lenient. Yeah, you could kosher these dishes. No one koshers, let's say, China, but it's my grandmother said. So you say, you know what, usually we don't do this, but we can make an exception. Because there are opinions that say you could kosher it. So there's an ability to say, in certain cases, to be lenient. Someone who's already growing more, and you say, you know what, you're mature enough, and you're Yiddishkeit to understand that here, it'd be more appropriate to take the stricter stance. That one's right or one's wrong. It depends on your step in the journey. And that's Beis Hillel. Afal became the common devorim. Nevertheless, in many things, Beis Shammai makil, and suddenly Beis Shammai will become lenient. Why? And this is the key. Because of eskalus. Eskalus is a word that we spoke about a long time ago, but it's a very important theme in Chassidus. Eskalus means that it's Tiferes, so we spoke about it in Tiferes. It's the beauty of different things coming together. Eskalus would be a painting. We have different colors coming together to make beauty. Eskalus would be an orchestra playing a symphony, all different instruments, different notes coming together. Eskalus means beauty. Hiskalus, coming together. Inclusion. It means inclusion, including others and making the beauty. If you even take, for example, our government that's so fractured, the beauty of the American government when it functions is that you have differences of opinion coming together to decide the path of this country. You need difference of opinion, you need dissent, you need other opinions, and that's in a healthy environment. When you can put emotions aside, you can come to what's the best thing at the end of the day. Sometimes we'll lean this way, sometimes that way, and this way, everyone in the country could have a place in this country. So healthy hiskalus means when I include all healthy opinions, all healthy colors, all healthy things into this mixture. So hiskalus is what we describe in Neshama. And we spoke in different times, how could one Neshama have more than one part? So here he doesn't go into it. Other times he spoke about it in the very end of the discussion of determining, if you remember this, going back a few years, the tzaddik and the Beinoni and the Rasha. We said, why should they say to hate tzaddik? If a person's born a Beinoni, a tzaddik, or a Rasha, right? Remember we said that you can't become a tzaddik. A tzaddik is a different type of soul. Why should it say become a tzaddik? So one answer we give is try your best. Another answer he gives is sometimes you'll be lucky. Hashem will put a little piece of a tzaddik soul into your story. Hashem will take, it's called Ibor. In souls' journeys of life, we have many types of souls. We have something called a dibuk. That's one soul and mixing into a body where there's already a previous soul and fighting with it. That's not good. You have a gilgul, a soul reincarnating in a body. You have something called Ibor. Ibor means pregnancy. What's pregnancy? When you have one soul with another little soul inside of it. That sometimes Hashem will take a soul and he's doing his best in life. Hashem says, you know what? I'm going to give you a tiny pieces of Shmuel in every soul. into your soul, and that's going to boost you to a whole new journey in life. It's called Ibur, and that's why it says a kohen, even though when we say the Nasi in the beginning of Nisan, there's a custom to say, if I'm from this tribe, let it be considered that I did the right offering, the days of the Nasi, the first 12 days of Nisan. The Rebbe's of Chabad said that you still say it even if you're a kohen or a Levi. I know which tribe I am, but you don't know which Ibur you have. You might have an Ibur of another tribe inside of you. You might have a pregnancy, meaning you might have a little piece of a soul mixed in. So, but here we're saying something else. We're saying this is more like the stones in Yaakov's dream. The stones in Yaakov's dream, they all became one because they were connected. You know the famous question we ask? He built a little ring around his head, Yaakov, with the stones. And then it says that the stones in the morning, he said, I took the stone. The Rashi says, at night it says he put all the stones. Why in the morning the stone? It says they all wanted to be the stone under Yaakov's head. So what happened? Hashem made him into one stone. Now he had one big curved U-shaped stone. But his head's still at one spot. So it says because they were connected, they weren't jealous of each other. They became one. When are you jealous of somebody if I think you and I are separate? Then I can say, how come you have it? But if it's my brother, I'm not jealous. Why? I'm happy for him. It's me, my spouse. We're one. I'm happy if you have it. I'm happy for you. In other words, the unity is when we become one. We are 15 Iraqs, but we're connected to each other. That's a skalos. A skalos means that we're all connected. That's what he says here. That the Hillel's soul, who called Gami Yamin, it also has Shammai's soul has also Miyamin. V'chein Sheresh Shama Beis Hillel, and the same thing is true about Beis Hillel. Top of next page 238. The soul of Beis Hillel is called Gami Smel. He also has a little bit of skalos, a little bit inclusion, a little bit color from the left of the strictness. Ki yodua derech u'mideis kodesh elyon. As we know the way things work in holiness. Why does it work? The less there is not taman there. Kitzutz u'pirut. Kitzutz means like a cutout, and pirut means a separation. There's no chopping apart and separation, which means in Kedusha we're all one. I have you, you have me, we're all together. There's not you and me, there's us. In other words, in Kedusha, all middays are connected. And it's very simple. We all come from the same source, like branches of a tree. Are you separate branches? Yes, but they'll go down a little further. We all come from one source. Holiness all comes from one source. And therefore, the middays of Hillel and the middays of Shammai include the opposing or polar opposite middays too at certain times. And therefore, he says, because the less taman kitzur, there is no carving out or separation there, chas v'shalom. And he says, the commentaries on the Tanya says here, and if you do find extremism or separation, you should know it's not holy. If you find someone that says, I cannot sit with this person, there's something wrong with you. If you cannot sit with this person, I know that person could be annoying. He could drive you bananas. I cannot sit with them. Now, either that person is evil, which would be true if the person was a terrorist or somebody, but amongst fellow Yidden, we're fellow Jews. You can't be another Jew that you find disgusting, that you can't share a ride with them. You can't go with them. It's just that I have an ego. I have my own issues. If I learn to get past it, then I learn to grow up a little bit. Now a little more holier, a little more humility. The kol middays kulism is one. Therefore, all middays really have the other ones in it. So Beis Shammai, by definition, has some Beis Hillel in it because he's holy, and Beis Hillel, by definition, has some Beis Shammai in it because he's holy. V'lachin hem yuchadeis zu bezu, and therefore they're connected. They're one with each of the other. Ki yadu aliyadichin. So on one hand, each neshama has its primary existence. I'm primary chesed. I'm primary gvura. At the same time, yes, I could be kind. I could be strict. And now I want to go to see this in. We'll start it now. We'll finish it next week. Of Beis Hillel. Of Avram and Yitzchak. And we come into this week's parsha. Avram is called the absolute chesed. Yitzchak is called next week's parsha. And Yitzchak is called absolute gvura. What do we find next week? Hashem says to Avram, now I know you, after the Akedah, now I know you fear me. Avram, you're the kindest guy. Look at you, about to slaughter your son. Wow, you're really so kind. We spoke many times that in each midah, you have the other one. That means automatically, if you're a loving person, you will be strict to your people you care about when it's the right time. If you're giving responsibility of children, and you're letting a child stick a clip into an outlet because you're so nice, you're not being nice, you're being foolish. True kindness sometimes has strictness. And true strictness has certain kindness. Yes, I unfortunately want to catch the mouse, so I'm going to put some cheese there. I thought you hate the mouse. I do, but I'm going to give him some cheese. Because that's how you deal with it. You have to have the balance of every single thing. There's the sweetness and the... So Avram, besides the fact that true kindness has fear in it, or gevura, But the truth is, he also has Gevurah for itself. And that's the Akedah. The fact that Avraham was willing to take Yitzchak and bring him in the Akedah means he was able to not only have kindness as the primary, he was able to have strictness as the primary. To take your son, God forbid, and bring him in the Akedah, it takes not just kindness that has Yira inside of it. It takes Gevurah that's really Gevurah. Why is this so significant? The key element we're bringing out here is that, and this is really the conclusion of today's discussion, the key element we have here is that the behaviors cannot be natural, has to be worked on. The Chassidus came to teach us that the natural serving Hashem, that's the angels. The angels are called animals. Why are they called animals? Because naturally animals have all the talents. Animals could sniff really good with the nose. They can run very fast. They can build a nest. No one goes, wow, look at this brilliant spider, how he builds the web, even though we do say this, it's really cool. But not that he's so brilliant. That's how Hashem made them. When a person acts within their function, that's not so impressive. Angels are made that way. Animals are made that way. The quality of a human being is that we can go against our nature. Our nature is to preserve ourselves, take care of ourselves, be a certain strictness, be a certain kindness, be a certain laziness, be a certain lustful or passionate or cold or calculated, whatever direction you are. Chassidus demands work on yourself. Stop living the way you were, live the way Hashem wants you to. In other words, do the same exact thing, but don't do it because of you, do it because of God. In other words, when you go inside and you see a guy who's hungry and you give him money to give tzedakah, if you gave it to him because you feel bad for him, that's beautiful. That's not the ultimate mitzvah. You know what the mitzvah is? I don't want to give it to him. He doesn't deserve it. He's smelling at my doorstep. I don't think he deserves it. Oh, Torah says give it to him. Now I give it to him. Now you're living the God's dream. Why? Because my nature was not to. When are you really living the dream of Yiddishkeit? Is when you go against your nature. I mean, it's worked on. All these behaviors, if it's natural, that's not me. Hashem wants to know, Avraham, when you serve me, are you serving me because you're just a nice guy and you're giving and you feed every Arab and every traveler, every Bedouin and every person? Or do you serve me because you think about it and you put self aside and you serve me? I've only one way to find out. Let me ask you something which is so unbecoming of you. I'm going to ask you to kill your child. This makes no sense. If you serve God only because you're a nice guy, you'll say, God, I'm sorry. I'll be happy to kill myself. I cannot kill my son. But he says, I'm running to do it. That means everything you did, now I know that everything you did until now was not about self. So when does a person really, really serve Hashem? When they're able to step out of their own journey. There's a story told about Chanina ben Chadrin. He was one of the Asar Malchus, one of the 10 martyrs. And he eventually was killed, unfortunately, but they wrapped him in a Sefer Torah and they put wet wool on his chest and put twigs around him. Horrible way of killing him. But before they killed him, he was going around and working and teaching Torah, risking his life. So he had a discussion with, I forget who was with, I'm just coming around a long time ago, but he had a discussion with another one of his colleagues. And they were talking about if he truly serves Hashem. How do you have the right to do this? The Roman government says you shouldn't, and you're risking your life, it's dangerous. So he said, what mitzvah have you done? He says, I collect the money for Purim, for the tzedakah, and I one time gave more than I was supposed to from my pocket, from the pocket money into the pot of money for tzedakah for the people. Some little story. The Rebbe asked a question. That's his greatness. He once gave a little tzedakah on Purim. So the Rebbe explained like this. Chanad ben Chadrin was a guy whose life was exactness. He was one of these guys today we call OCD, in a respectful way, of course. He's a tzaddik, one of the Sarah Malchus. OCD means I do everything exact. He had a cheshbon of every single penny of a tzedakah. And if you mixed up a penny, he doesn't mind giving extra $2 tzedakah. But he had a cheshbon. One Purim, he went and without a cheshbon gave money to the pot. Meaning he went out of his nature. And the person goes, oh, with that you'll be okay. In other words, that is the ultimate serving Hashem. As long as you're doing things in your nature, it's beautiful. But have you gone out of your box? Have you gone out of your little square? And this is what we're talking about. When we go next week now, we'll talk about Avram and Yitzchak. How they served Hashem, how Avram served Hashem with Yira. And Yitzchak we'll see with Ava. This is when we know that the real Avis. Meaning, it's not about yourself. You're not functioning on my pre-programmed function. An angel can't go different. The angel of, we'll see next week in the Parsha, Vayera, an angel of healing can't destroy. An angel of destruction can't heal. Why not? Because you are a behemoth, which means you're a carnivore, you're a predator, you're the, what they're called, the ones who are victims, the ones who are, you're the food that they're hunting. The bottom line is, you have your nature. Yidden have the ability to overcome our nature. And that's what Avram was expressing with the Akedah. Hashem wanted to pull out. That's what Beis Shammai Hill did with their change of things, meaning I'm able to see it differently. And that's what we have to do. A lot of times you might say, I can't help myself. So what is the thing that we do in our life that is really going against our nature? This is what the Alter is talking about in this chapter. So while it's really about tzedakah, it's about tzedakah, about giving tzedakah to different types of people. And then we're going to see next week, a beautiful way to reinterpret the pasuk. Morav tuvcha shetzafant parecha is a whole different definition what the pasuk means. And that will do, God willing, next week.